And if you did purchase one, please feel free to take it at the conclusion of the service. The second reading is the gospel reading from Mark chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised, for he is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So the women trudged on, bearing the deep pain of grief and the heavy burden of their spices. And the other disciples hid, fearful, grieving the loss of the man who was the most important person they had ever known. A few of them likely sat alone, both their souls and their bodies wrapped in darkness. Most of them had probably buried parents. Many had buried siblings. Some may have even buried children. Many had seen friends die of disease or violence. So they understood grief. But this grief seemed harder and deeper than any they had experienced so far. The men wouldn't discover the answers the messengers bore that day until sometime later. But for the women, their world was about to be upended in a way that would bring great joy, but initially left them terrified. The women approached the tomb. And they met a man who told them something beyond belief. Jesus is not here. You can look and see the grave clothes. Go and tell the other disciples he is alive and has gone ahead of them into Galilee. They ran in fear at these words. Eventually they would recover to bear the news to others. But at first they were simply too overwhelmed to understand it. Death, they understood. Death meant goodbye. Death had a finality to it. But now, suddenly, there was no finality in death. Something new had happened in their world, and everything had changed. Part of the incredible power of Easter is that the story does not avoid death. Jesus, fully human, we are told, died. Those who knew him and loved him grieved his passing. They buried him. His friends and family each faced a moment of loss, looking like we do when we face loss. Death is a reality we live with in our world. Why do we like spring so much? Because it brings the answer to a world filled with what looks like death in winter. The world grows cold in winter. The trees lose their leaves. Flowers wither and die. Annuals really do die. If the winter is too harsh, we will even see hardier plants that are not annuals die. Exposed for the cold for too long, any of us would succumb. And of course, death plays a very personal role in our lives as well. Like the disciples, most of us have had to grieve. Some have borne a greater burden in this area than others. We too come to our tombs and we find ourselves peering in, trying to catch a glimpse of that person gone too quickly. We learn to grieve. We learn that life has a harsh ending. And the message on this Easter day is a very gracious one. There is no admonishment for failure to believe the impossible message we hear year after year. Yes, you came to the tomb. We knew you would be here. We knew you would come looking for him. But thankfully, the message doesn't stop there, because the messengers invite us to look away from the grave to an incredible message that lies beyond. One of the things that has blessed me as a pastor is being able to walk through families when they go through times of grief. And part of the blessing in that is I truly believed I have learned so much more from them than I've ever been able to impart from others about the Easter message. Family members who grieved have taught me this. Even those who I've done funerals for have taught me this through their lives and when they talk about their plans in advance. Because they bore the same message that the messengers gave that day, the message from the angels. Jesus is no longer here. Jesus is alive. Jesus has gone ahead of us into Galilee. He's waiting there for us to join him. In Mark, Galilee is the place where most of the ministry work happened. Jesus, resurrected, had gone back out into the world, and he invited the disciples to follow him there. Jesus invited them to enter new life where the work of the ministry could continue. On this Easter day, the first part of the message is simple. Jesus isn't here in the empty tomb. Death could not hold him. Look, he is gone. You can see like the disciples did if you look into that tomb. He is gone. The power of death has been overcome by the new life God has given. On this Easter day, the second part of the message is this. Not only is Jesus alive, but Jesus has gone out into the world. Jesus has gone to the place where meaningful ministry happens. The new life he invites us to enter is a life of ministry, service, and love. Jesus has gone to the place where there are people who need healing, need hope, need feeding, need deliverance, need freedom. Jesus invites us to enter into this new life where we can bring healing and hope. We can be the ones who feed and deliver. We can be the ones to bring a message of freedom. Now, many of us will head to family meals right after church today. We might not think of this as a place where we're invited to follow Jesus into a new life where we can serve, but it's a great place to do that. It's a great place to go home and share the message of Easter. Not to preach a sermon, that likely wouldn't be appreciated. But, it's interesting that a huge amount of what Jesus did in his life was not preaching. It was just spending time caring for people. He spent time healing and feeding and bringing hope. When we're seated with those we love around the tables in our homes, it's a great place to do the work of healing and feeding and bringing hope. We can lay aside all the judgments and all our agendas and all our past hurts and just take care of each other and love each other and serve each other and show God's love to each other. No matter our politics or our concerns about past arguments or anything else that divides us, we can treat that as our first Galilee, the place where Jesus invites us to bring new life, where we follow his example and care for one another. And that's just the first place we can follow Jesus. Jesus is waiting for us, risen, offering new life to us and to others in our workplaces, in our schools, in our neighborhoods. Jesus is waiting for us, risen, offering new life in our social circles, in our communities. Jesus is waiting for us, risen, offering new life just beyond these doors. The same message comes to us in our churches. Jesus is inviting us in our churches to step outside of our safe boundaries. Too often, churches can become tombs rather than places of worship, it's sad to say. Too often we can think that this is a good place to hide, waiting for Jesus to come for us. But the message on this Easter day for churches, for Christians, is that Jesus has gone out into the world and is waiting for us to follow. Motivated by the stirring command to follow him into the world, filled with his power, he invites us to step into this new life that awaits, to follow him into the world and to do the exact same kind of work that he did. The entry to new life does not lie through the tomb. That's empty now. Jesus has risen. He's gone ahead of us. He invites us to follow him into the world. We may be fearful like those women, but God will give us the strength to overcome this fear and follow him into the world. He's out there. He's waiting for us at our tables, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, in our schools, everywhere we go. Jesus is waiting for us to join him so that we can continue the work he has shown us how to do. Let's follow Jesus into the world to serve and to love and to share this incredible new life. Amen.